Дякую товариству імені Шевченка, науковому товариству імені Шевченка, що влаштували мені цей вечір, це пообідне читання. Мені цього року виповнилося 85 років, це просто жах таке сказати, а таке сталося. І видавництво, яке мене від довшого часу друкує, видало з цієї нагоди ці дві мої книжки «Warm Arctic Nights» і «Iguanas of Heat». Обидві книжки я старався писати спеціально оцю «Warm Arctic Nights». Ідея прийшла мені десь майже 40 років тому, може, 35 років тому. Як вона прийшла, я про це писав, згадував в інтерв'ю, але може я коротенько скажу. Я десь чув на радіо, як я тоді телевізора не дивився, як вони говорили, запрошували людей на якісь там караїбські крузи, і що там будуть одне з тих чарів буде, що ви будете любуватися на островах the cool tropical nights. І це мені звучало дуже цікаво, бо це є оксиморон. Я подумав про теплі полярні ночі. І відразу прийшло мені на думку, що це була б добрий заголовок для моєї автобіографії перших 10,5 років, які були дуже турбулентні. І я старався, я думав писати цю книжку досить скоро, скажімо, пару місяців після цього, вона не виходила, бо це мені... Я пишу, власне, завжди про себе, але не про теми, які мене турбують, але не відваючись до автобіографічних фактів. Я відштовхуюся від них так, як у снах ми маємо візії, які версії цього, що в нашому житті відбувається, вони цілком інакшими. Тому що це багато можна цікавіші речі зробити, відштовхуючися від голих фактів. І я відклав цю роботу, писав інші речі, пробував знову раз і раз, мабуть, 4 або 5 разів ніяк не виходило. І я думав вже, що я ніколи не напишу цієї книжки, і я чувся дуже неадекватним. Що ж в тебе за письменник, Юрко, якщо є така тема, яка тебе муляє, ти не можеш її обернути в книжку. І тоді десь 2 роки тому, восени 2017 року, я вирішив взятися за цю тему і перепрошую. І радше, ніж писати нормальну розповідь, я поставив себе питання, яка була кімната. І це була кімната, де я народився якийсь час, пам'ятаю, як виростав. І тоді я відповів собі це питання, і я вирішив, що побачив, це було дуже легко і просто, і ефективно. І я так написав цю книжку, де написано у формі запитань і відповідей. Я вже кілька разів звертався до цього, раз формально, а ще раз так неформально звертався до цієї форми. Є такий нова поема, називається «Оперене серце», там є 14 розділів, і вони кожні є запитання і відповіді. Також велика моя збірка, цикл поезії, чи властиво поема «Анкети», вона є у формі таких не запитань, але рубрик, які треба заповняти. Це, до речі, я пригадав собі, звідки я це взяв. Я це, мабуть, пам'ятав тоді, як я ці речі писав раніше, а тепер я забув, бо тепер пригадаю, що це було мене. Я пам'ятаю, як я ходив до школи ще на Україні, на лекціях катехизму. Вона була представлена в формі запитань і відповідей. І це очевидно, походить, це є цей сократівський метод, сократівський діалог, це походить з цього. І мені це, видно, дуже тоді подобалося. І я це застосував вже 2 рази раніше, і тепер я застосую це в цьому творі. Це дуже ефективний спосіб позбуватися, проводити розповідь, не мусячи обов'язково єднати окремі сцени, бо просто можете запитати себе і видаєте. Вони є поєднані в асоціативний спосіб радше, ніж якийсь там логічний. Окей. Друга книжка є, як кажуть в Галичині, інша пара кальошів. Вона не є властиво автобіографічна, хоча там є елементи автобіографічні спеціально в першій частині. В другій частині там є описи, йдеться про таке sterile marriage, стерильне подружжя, поділене на дві частини. В другій частині говориться про те, перша частина в Америці, друга частина є в Мексико, і я там описую місто Меріда і Чичен Ушмаль, ці археологічні місця. І це є автобіографічна, але сама історія не є. Добре. Справді будемо мати проблему, але Олесь мене виручить, але я старатимуся якийсь час принаймні читати сам. Книжка, каже, Warm Arctic Nights, вона складається з трьох частин. Warm, Arctic і Nights. Part 1 is warm, part 2 is Arctic, and part 3 is Nights. Я спеціально зроблено так. Перша частина є про... книжка є, скажімо, на 80% автобіографічна, 22% уява. Але це, якщо говорити про правду, вона є 100% правдива, але, скажімо, детальні сцени, там, де маємо розповідь, що діється, то це, очевидно, є уява. Тільки я старався дотримуватися строго до цього, що я хотів сказати. Я попереставляв деякі факти хронологічно, поміняв трішки тих персонажів, але на загал це є fictionalized biographies, тобто художній твір, створений на базі автобіографічних фактів. Це не є спомини, але це не є автобіографічний твір. Dedicація є to the memory of my father who loved me more than anyone else. Це є it's an ambiguous statement. It means that either my father loved me more than anybody else loved me, or my mother loved me more than he loved anybody else, and I decided to leave it like that, feeling that this will be it might be true. Anyway, мені сподобалося так. Переду їй текстові таке мотто, чи що як це назвати, це арія, це німецька колоскова пісенька, до неї я додав один рядочок, я скажу який. Schlaf, Kindchen, schlaf, dein Vater ist ein Graf, deine Mutter ist eine Edelfrau, sie badet dich im Morgentau, schlaf, Kindchen, schlaf. Спи, дитинко, спи, твій батько є граф, твоя мати є шляхтичка, вона кохає тебе в ранній Росії, спи, дитинко, спи. Оцей «Sie dich im Morgentau», це я додав, думаючи, відчуваючи, що це для ритму буде краще. Отже, що я зроблю? Я згадав, що я вернуся з України, і книжка вийшла в перекладі Максима Нестелеєва. Я співпрацював з ним дуже близько, так що це називаємо авторизований переклад у видавництві «Темпора». Я зачну читатиму з оригіналу, але як я прочитаю цей перші пару сторінок з оригіналу, я також прочитаю цей український переклад, щоб дати вам смак, як воно звучить українською. А звучить воно так, як повинно звучати. How was the room? It was long and narrow, with a tall ceiling filled with the rose and honey light of a kerosene lamp, shadows along its walls looking like rows of tall men dressed in long black robes, stern-looking but kindly disposed toward me. They would nod approvingly as I was bathed before being put to bed in a sit-up zinc tub in warm water, turned light brown from the oak bark steeped in it, which made my skin squeak. Sometimes mint was steeped in it instead, and its fresh smell accompanied me to the cozy world of my bed. There was a big, soft, moss-green, tufted sofa against one of the walls, a huge wardrobe of shiny, varnished, straw-colored wood along another one, and a big round table in the middle, covered with a dark green velvet cloth that in places reached to the floor. I loved to hide under it, pretending to be in a tent, looking out for Indians who were coming to scalp me, at whom I was going to shoot a long wooden pen with a sharp steel point dipped in red ink to make it poisonous, using a bow I had made myself. Українською це звучить так. Яка була кімната? Довгаста й вузька, з високою стелею, залитою рожевим і медовим світлом газової лампи, а тіні на стінах скидалися на ряди високих чоловіків у довгих чорних сутанах із суворими, але доброзичливими для мене поглядами. Вони свально кивали, коли перед сном мене садовили в цинкову балію і купали в теплій воді, бурштинуватій від замоченої в ній дубової кори, від чого моя шкіра аж порипувала. Іноді замість кори замочували м'яту, і її свіжий запах супроводжував мене в затишний світ ліжка. Біля однієї стіни стояла велика м'яка тафтингова канапа, зелена як мох, а біля іншої чимала шафа з блискучої лакованої деревини солом'яного кольору, а посередині великий круглий стіл, накритий темно-зеленою оксамитною скатертиною, що де-не-де сягала підлогою. Я полюбляв під нею ховатися, уявляючи себе в наметі в засідці на індіянців, що прийшли по мій скалп, і в них я збирався влучити із власноруч зробленого лука довгим дерев'яним пером із гострим сталевим площиком, умоченим у червоне чорнило, щоб той став отруйним. Так, друже Олесь, поможи мені, будь ласка, тут.
Дякую.
Це мабуть, перше таке сталося в житті, бо воно може бути на краще. Олесь дуже добре читає.
Your grandmother. Every summer, we would go to stay for a few weeks with my grandmother, who lived far away in the mountains. We would take one train for a short distance first, and then change to another, in which we traveled for hours. It took almost a whole day to get there. I liked the second part of the trip the most. We would usually be alone in the compartment, and I would sit next to the open window, facing in the direction we traveled, the inrushing air like a cold pillow pressed tight against my face, making it hard for me to breathe. It was mixed with the smoke coming out of the engine and smelled of hard-boiled eggs, like those we consumed with sandwiches Mother had prepared and brought along in a big basket, which I liked. I liked even more to stick my head out of the window and then be really smothered by the air so that I would gasp, but would be told not to do it because of the danger of a spark in the smoke getting into my eye and blinding me. Afraid as I was of that, I couldn't resist the temptation of leaning out the window, time and time again, however, especially on the curves, because then I could see the whole train from the engine up front to the last car at the end. They both looked surprisingly small, almost like toys, and the train shorter than I had thought it was, which I found nice. Sometimes Father would have enough of my behavior, however, and would angrily close the window, raising it up with a leather strap that stuck out through a gap in the sill. The air would get progressively colder and fresher as we got higher into the mountains. Everybody liked that, and the window would be lowered again if it had been raised, and I would behave so that it wouldn't be closed again. There was a tunnel we had to go through before arriving at our destination, and the compartment would get all dark when we went in it. The air would reek of smoke, and the clamor the train made, now reverberating off the stone walls, got so loud you couldn't hear anything else. This went on for a long time, so that it seemed it would never end. But then, suddenly, everything was bright again. The air smelled fresh, the clamor was gone, and you could hear the rhythmic clicking the wheels of the train were making as they rolled along the rails. The town lay spread out in front of us below the high viaduct, and the train proceeded at a slow pace along it before arriving at the station on the other side. It has high white stucco walls and a red-tiled roof, and there were flower pots suspended from its eaves with red flowers in them that looked like flames. The perron, the platform around it, was paved with tiles divided into little squares which made it look like a chocolate bar. And walking along it, your feet made sharp clicking noises like a chocolate bar breaking. And I always felt as though I was walking along a huge chocolate bar with its silver paper stripped off when we came to stay with my grandmother, and was especially looking forward to it. She waited for you? Grandmother always waited for us in front of the station in a fiacre, its hood folded down back, all in black, her head tied in a shawl, and wearing a floor-length dress, her hands on the ivory handle of a cane she carried outside. She would kiss me when I got inside the fiacre beside her, and would press into my hand a chocolate bar, such as I imagined as I walked down the perron, which she produced from somewhere among the folds of her dress, and which she knew I expected. Our luggage would be put in the trunk in the back. My parents and Nora would squeeze themselves into the front and back seats which faced each other. The driver would get up on his high seat, crack his whip, and the fiacre would roll off into town. The street was paved with cobblestones, and the noise the horses' hoofs made on it made me think again of the sound a chocolate bar makes when you break it. And I was looking forward to hearing the sound the one grandmother gave me would make as I was breaking it once we got to her place and ate what she'd prepare for us. You shouldn't have sweets before a meal and not let your stomach run your life. You ate what? Home-baked sourdough rye bread, shiny and with the imprint of a cabbage leaf on top of the loaf, with freshly churned butter, and curds with sour cream, and radishes and scallions and dill, and fresh buttermilk to drink along with it, and sorrel soup with rice and sour cream and sliced hard-boiled egg in it, like my mother used to make, and stewed rabbit and sour cream sauce with mashed potatoes and pureed beets, and white cheese patties sautéed in butter, served with cherry and currant preserves, and honey bread, and wild strawberries, and raspberries, and blueberries, served with sugar and cream, and mint tea with honey and local mineral water with raspberry syrup, or without it to finish it off. You went to sleep? The lightly starched and carefully ironed linen gently caressed my skin as I crawled in between the sheets and instantly slid off into sleep, as if head first along a slippery, steeply inclined board, accompanied by the sweet smell of apples that were used to scent it in the chest in which it was kept. A singing gate. There was a flower garden in front of the house, separated from the street by an iron fence. The gate in it made a sound like a bird chirping discreetly a few times and then falling silent as you opened or closed it. Flowers in the garden? Along the fence grew red climbing roses. A wide yellow brick path running from the gate to the front door cut the garden in two, and went around each of the 2 rectangles which took up the rest of the garden and were edged with the same kind of bricks, stood up vertically at an angle. In the center of each, there was a large circle with white peonies along the edge in one of them and pink ones in the other, and tall, flaming red dahlias in the middle. A thick carpet of mountain pinks filled in the rest of each rectangle. They gave off a sweet, heady smell when it got dark, which persisted until dawn. It was so strong it sometimes woke me up in the middle of the night. A singing water pump. There was a water pump in the vegetable garden in the back of the house. It made a sound like a bird singing as you pumped it, going on, never ready to stop. I had to fight sometimes to move the handle as we were filling the bucket, because I liked to be the one who made it sing. The water flowed out of the spigot into the bucket, felt like a man's muscular arm. The one in the bucket smelled like a sheaf of cold flowers. The garden in the back. A huge apple tree grew in one corner of the garden in the back, which sunlight barely penetrated. It was always half dark among its branches as during a moonlit night. The apples were small and red, and seemed to hop around on the branches like birds as you tried to pick them. You could hear them falling into grass at night, like flutes, making long, sad sounds, which I liked. There were also red and yellow currant bushes growing in it, with the berries like tiny suns, red or yellow, bunched up in tight constellations. Gooseberries, their yellow-green insides murky like stagnant water. Strawberries growing in neat rows that exploded in your mouth with flavor as you bit into them, threatening to puncture through your palate. Carrots growing in even neater rows, sweet as if dipped in sugar as you chewed on them after washing them off under the pump, as well as cabbage, kohlrabi, and sweet peas climbing nimbly along tall espaliers, the peas inside the pods like drops of green sugar water, and the pods sweet too after you pulled the clear membrane off them. You went swimming. Sometimes mother would prepare food for the whole day, while she would put in the basket she had brought along on the train, and we would hire a fiacre to take us up to a big river a few kilometers outside of town and pick us up later. There were hardly any people ever on it, but wide, flat pebble beaches along tall osier bushes, and we would spread out our blankets and towels on the ones we liked and sun ourselves or bathe. The river was shallow, with only occasional deep spots, and mother would swim while I and Nora splashed around close to the bank. Her movements were smooth and silent, as if she were a puddle of oil on the surface of water which was changing its shape all the time. Father would usually stay on the blanket, reading a newspaper or playing chess by himself. And picnicking. Mother would prepare food once again, and we would go into the hills outside of town and picnic on top of one in the middle of a field in tall grass or on the edge of woods where it was short. Usually there'd be just the 4 of us, but occasionally some friends of my parents would come along. They had 2 girls about Nora's age, and we would play with them, while I played alone or listened to my parents and the other 2 adults talking. Father would sometimes play chess with the man if he was there. Otherwise, he would play by himself while I watched him make the moves and would ask questions. Mushroom and berry picking. The woods were cool and smelled of rosin, and the ground in them was slippery from pine needles that covered it like short-clipped hair, so that you could slip on them and fall down if you weren't careful. and the mushrooms bulged out from under the soil like shy little animals afraid or unable to break through, or would stand strong and proud as if daring anyone to pick them. The ones with little caps on top of a big fat stem shaped like a barrel called beely, white, were the best, especially when served in a sour cream sauce. But I also liked the yellow ones called lisičky, little foxes, and the blue or purple ones called holubinki, pigeon mushrooms, or anything else we picked. It was hot in the clearings in the strong sunlight, and insects hummed in them like a harp that had been plucked and thrown in the grass, but which wouldn't grow still, and wild strawberries grew in them in the grass like drops of sweet fragrant blood, and you searched with your fingers for raspberries and blackberries under the leaves on the long climbing vines where they hid, and would find them, soft and obedient, letting you pick them, not trying to get away. Blueberries grew on short, curly bushes, and you picked them with a special wide wooden comb, running it through the leaves as if through hair. A circus? There were a few circuses I saw as we were visiting my grandmother, but I especially remember one with a family of acrobats performing all sorts of things, ending with a still-standing figure of all of them. There was the father, the mother, 2 boys, a girl, and a little black and white dog with a curled-up tail. With the exception of the dog, they were all dressed in black and white striped one-piece short-sleeved bathing suits. The father stood with his legs bent in the knees and spread wide on top of a big white board, balancing on a huge black iron ball, his arms stuck out to the sides, while the mother sat on his shoulders with her legs wrapped along his chest and under his armpits, her arms spread out like her husband's. The boys, who were bigger than the girl, stood on top of the father's thighs, leaning out while holding on to his hands. And the girl sat on her mother's shoulders the way the latter sat on her husband's, her arms spread out in similar fashion, the dog curled up neatly on top of her head. He got there by himself, by climbing along the bodies of the people quickly and skillfully like a monkey. The figure remained still for a long time, all members of the family with the exception of the father, as well as the dog, smiling. The expression on the face of the former was of unbelievable strain. It was swollen, dark red, almost black with blood. His lips were tightly shut, his cheeks and eyes bulged, and the muscles and veins under his skin rippled like snakes trying to get away. You could see it was getting harder and harder for him to go on, and just as it looked like he was going to collapse, there was the sound of a shot going off somewhere, and the whole figure disintegrated in an instant, everyone jumping down to the floor and bowing, including the dog. They were rewarded with a roar of approval and applause from the audience, and stood for a long time, straightening up and bowing, the father breathing heavily, trying to catch his breath.
Very well.
A dwarf elephant. Another attraction in that circus was a little white dwarf elephant, the size of a St. Bernard dog. His master was a bald, elderly gentleman with gold-rimmed glasses, and the elephant did all sorts of things for him, such as counting, by tapping its foot, and spelling out names by pointing with its trunk to a chart with the alphabet on it. I was so excited about it that I couldn't go to sleep all night and wanted to see it again the next day. It was Monday, and the circus was leaving that day, so there was no chance of my attending the performance again. But, seeing how excited I was, Mother took me to where the circus camped, and we were permitted to go to the owner's wagon. It was smaller than some of the other, but very beautiful, made of yellow varnished wood trimmed with brass, and with a round green metal top with brass gutters around it. Mother knocked on the door, and when the owner heard about why we were there, we were permitted to go inside. The elephant was there, in a closed-off area at the back of the wagon, with 2 blue armchairs and a matching sofa in it. Its skin was actually a pale gray, rather than pure white, and where it creased was blue, like marks left by a carbon copy as you run something sharp over it. We sat on the sofa, and the owner and the elephant in the armchairs, the latter somewhat awkwardly, supporting itself with one of its front legs, and looking at me with interest with the small, shiny red eyes of a wise old man. It counted off my age when I said how old I was, by gently tapping its foot, as on the stage, and it spelled my name by pointing to the chart. Then we were served tea in little white and blue china cups, which the elephant poured from a matching white and blue teapot, holding it with his trunk. It squeezed my hand feebly with its trunk again, as if bored, as we were saying goodbye, and it followed us with its eyes as we were going out the door. Yeah.
And then wonderful, what I think all this, I mean, it's fantastic. He's reading so well. I don't know what I'm going to say, but I'll read one more. This is from the part called Warm. It takes place, as I said, in Poland before the war. The part ends when the Germans come into the village. The second part is in Ukraine, where the family has moved after the Germans overran it, and the third part is fleeing Ukraine to Germany, and that's called Nights. Let's see. Yeah, this is called. This is chapter 10 from the first part. Pan Florian, Mr. Florian, was the postmaster in the village and a friend of my parents. He was tall and gangly, had a shiny bald head with a thin fringe of graying hair above the ears, and the nape of his neck running around it, and pale blue eyes that looked like puddles of milky liquid. His joints constantly cracked very loudly, so that it seemed he was breaking twigs when he walked or moved his arms, hands, or fingers. He had a serious problem. From time to time, big bumps like giant boils the size of walnuts that wouldn't break through the skin would appear on his forehead, nose, chin, under the eyes, and so on, and would completely change his appearance. They would stay there for a day or two and then disappear without a trace, as if they hadn't been there. There was the ghost of a Babylonian general or vizier named Bel Rabim Abilsil, who refused to enter the kingdom of the dead and wanted to inhabit Pan Florian's body. For some reason, he took a liking to it. But Pan Florian wouldn't agree to it and fiercely fought against it. The ghost would come to him in his sleep at night, and they would have long arguments about it and sometimes get into physical fights. The next day, Pan Florian would be pale and exhausted, and often his face would change after that. One morning he woke up with his bed all bloody and long gashes on his chest, belly, arms, and even face. He and the ghost had fought with Turkish scimitars all night long and inflicted wounds on each other. But the gashes were shallow, more like scratches than cuts, and they healed in a couple of days again without leaving a trace. Other strange things would happen to Pan Florian too. He would hold a box of matches in his hand, for instance, and the matches would fly up in the air, forming a neat arc, and stay there for a few seconds, clinking like metal rods before falling to the ground. Similar things would happen to a deck of cards he held in his hand. For instance, as he was about to deal from it, they would fly out of his fingers into the air, form a beautiful arc, hang there still for a while, and then fall to the ground like the matches. He was a bachelor and lived alone. One night he was playing chess with the canonic, the village priest, when the door opened. A strange dog ran into the room, and Pan Florian yelled at it to go away. It turned into a pile of sand on the floor. An old woman they'd never seen before then came in through the door with a broom, a dustpan, and a pail, swept up the sand and walked back out. When the maid came in the morning, there was still some sand left on the floor, and she had to sweep it up. He would come to dinner at our place from time to time, and sometimes there'd be strange knocking heard coming from different places in the apartment, sometimes even the furniture, as well as the sound of footsteps and the clinking of a metal chain. And Pan Florian would then say something angrily in a strange language, and the noises would stop. At times like this, Father would sit with an expression of annoyance on his face, and Mother and Nora pale and with their eyes bulging. I too would be scared and would feel chills running up my spine and hair on my head stand on end, but when the noises stopped, I wished for them to come back. Things like that were more exciting than regular life. Now, I mean, we can go on reading for a long time, but we certainly can't. We still have one more book to go through. And now, this was the childhood. I mean, the warm memories of childhood. And I'll ask Oles to read now from the third part. This is when the boy is on the train, and they are going to Germany. Stefan here is a distant cousin of his mother. I think it's 2 or 3 pages. Yeah.
Stefa's son. Another couple of days later, I woke up in the middle of the night. It was pitch dark in the car, and the train wasn't moving. We'd been traveling when I was falling asleep, but had stopped, and were apparently waiting once again for permission to proceed. It was probably the train stopping that had woken me up. It appeared we were somewhere out in the country, for it was still all around. Everyone seemed asleep. The only thing that could be heard was people's heavy breathing. The preceding day, Stefa had spent a lot of time with her son and had paid no attention to me. That bothered me at first, but I'd managed to push it out of my mind and went on with whatever I was doing. Now, however, the feeling came back to me even clearer than before. It was a fear of being abandoned. She was the only one I had left. And if she were to turn her back on me, I'd be completely alone. The sensation was extremely uncomfortable, as if I were finding myself in a very tight place, which was making me feel claustrophobic. The back of my head and the nape of my neck tingled as if growing numb. I had to do something. We all slept on the floor with Stefa's son on my left and she behind him. I could hear his soft breathing with a slight rattle in it, as if he had a mild cold. I had threatened to kill Uncle Genko, succeeded in doing it, and had gotten away without being punished. What if I killed Stefa's son? I could pinch his nose, preventing him from breathing, and he would suffocate. No one would know it was I who killed him, and Stefa would then have only me to love. Besides, what was the point of this living on? Stefa had a hard time to get proper food for him, milk and eggs, and what we all ate was making him weak and sick. And if he were to survive, what would await him? life in a strange country among hostile people. And if his mother died, what would he do? He was better off dying now. I was lying on my back, so, holding my breath, I rolled over onto my sides, stretched out my right hand, found his nose with my fingers, and pinched it together. It was tiny, and its nostrils were hard, as if made from rubber, and would open up right up as soon as I relaxed my fingers. They reminded me of a rubber duck I used to play with in the water when I was taking a bath as a small child. Oddly enough, he didn't try to take my hand away, however, or wiggle out from under it, but merely started crying. At first, it was just a whimper, but soon it turned into loud cries. For an instant, I thought of covering his mouth with my hand to suffocate him, but realized it wouldn't work, and besides, I heard Steffa stirring on the other side. What would happen if she found my hand over her son's mouth? Turning cold with fear, I quickly moved my hand away, just in time to avoid being touched by hers, with which she was reaching for his face. Hoping with all my might she wouldn't guess what had happened, I rolled into a ball under my covers, trying to get as small as possible, and lay dead still, waiting for what might come. My original instinct was to roll over onto the other side, but I decided against it. It was better not to move. Rolling over might bring me to her attention. She didn't suspect anything, and after quieting her son, went back to sleep. Relieved, I relaxed, and when the train began moving, fell asleep after a while, once again lulled by its rocking and the sounds it made. Дякую. Thank you.
Okay, we will. I'll just mention that the book is this was the 13th chapter. So 13th part of the 13th chapter of the third part. So two more in two more chapters it ends. It's followed the text is followed by a variation on the original aria. It says, if you remember, it was, the original was Schlafkind kein Schlaf, dein Vater ist ein Graf, deine Mutter ist eine Edelfrau, sie badet dich im Morgentau, Schlafkind kein Schlaf. Variation is, sleep baby sleep, your daddy is a creep, your mommy is a wicked witch, she makes you sleep in a roadside ditch, sleep baby sleep. I'm not referring to my parents, I'm referring to fate. I mean, father and mother in the thing is the fate. So that's the, after you read the book, this is what will, the effect that you will have. Okay, we'll spend some time on the Iguanas of Heat. It says in the back, a woman possessed by an inexplicable hatred for her husband plans his death on their forthcoming trip to Mexico. It is unwittingly facilitated by a young girl with whom the husband falls in love. It sounds like a suspense story, but it's actually a deconstruction of a sterile marriage. Dear Olis, could you come and read? It has two parts, and this is part chapter 4 of the first part.
And I read chapter 4? Okay.
Yes, it is not.
Okay, so just chapter 4.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Existentialism, sickness unto death, the sickness of the white man, pale-bodied, pale-faced, sitting bent over a half-empty cup of cold black coffee in a dark cafe, staring blankly into nowhere, the first time in Paris when he was working on his book on existentialism. They went to its cathedral, the Sartre, Chartres, Les Deux Magots, to inhale the aura of the place, movement, vaguely hoping to see Sartre and Beauvoir. Sure they wouldn't. People that important don't mingle with the mortals, open themselves to so much rips. Hopes don't come true, but then 10 minutes after they'd sat down, ordered coffee. Lo and behold, who wouldn't stride in through the door if not Sartre, not with Beauvoir, but with a bevy of young boys and girls, mostly girls, students, dancing around him like angels around God. He cut a weird figure, almost a midget in rumpled clothes. Shirt, the tie, a limp rope dangling from his neck, hair greasy, not washed for days, maybe weeks, thin on top, slicked over, skull shining through, one eye behind the glasses, the round glasses weird, white, big, pointing to the side, like a gut sticking out of the eye socket. She whispered to him he should go over, introduce himself, tell the great man about his book. He wouldn't, shook his head, started shaking, asked her not to bother him, leave him alone, stared blankly into nowhere, a cowardly, pale-faced white man, not brave, not like those bare-chested, bare-legged, red-skinned braves, their heads crowned with eagle feathers. No, sprouting mighty feathered manes like fierce lines of the sky, cheeks marked with red and white clay, galloping madly atop their horses, bareback, reinless, legs giving directions by pressing down on the hot, sweaty, bulging sides, tomahawks, bows and arrows, short Winchester rifles in their hands, waving them menacingly, mouths emitting endless streams of frightening, high-pitched la-la-la sounds, galloping to do battle with the white man, the taker of their land, usurper of their rights, to kill him, take their land back. Galloping precedes the white man's death. Galloping toward her, to join her, make her join them, her mother, her brothers, her people. They said she was white, echt Deutsch, pure German. Her grandfather, Opa, Kaspar Kraus, came from Pomerania, homesteaded, did well, sent for his sweet Katerina. She came, they married, had children, got rich, brought her younger sister Berta over. There was an Indian hand around the ranch, a big, strapping, good-looking guy, everybody liked. After Caspar Jr. and Charlotte, there were no children for a long time, almost 10 years. Then her father Carl came. Looked a little like his father Caspar, but also Indian, high cheekbones, tall. Caspar was short. People joked he had two fathers, Caspar and the Indian. They said Caspar turned sterile, wanted more children, and asked for the Indian to help out. Katerina liked him a lot. They took turns, first Caspar, then the Indians, so the semen was mixed. People joked, but she thought it was possible, likely, the Indian was involved. It was true, there was something Indian about the way Caspar looked. So maybe that's why her father looked like a little Indian. But maybe not. Maybe because of the Indian. The Indian died of tuberculosis a few years later. There were no more children. Her mother was of German origin too, beer makers from Milwaukee called Kieselbach. Her father met her when in college at Marquette, so supposedly she was pure German. But she looked a little Indian like her father, looked part Indian, but inside was a full-blood Indian through and through, daydreamed after being one. Years ago, there was an Indian woman who led the braves in their village to fight the settlers who'd attacked them after the chief was killed. And they won. It was her. She'd reveal herself one day and lead her people to fight the whites. So wouldn't that happen?
Okay. Let me try and see whether I can do this. This will be the last thing that we'll read tonight. This is chapter 12 of the second part 2. He dreamed black, empty dreams as. The title is kind of strange, the Iguanas of Heat, and it's explained in this chapter where it's come from. He dreamed black, empty dreams as his thoughts had been before he fell asleep, sleeping for at least an hour, because when he woke up it was hot in the room and he was covered with sweat. The air conditioner still wasn't working. He lay still on his back as he'd been lying while falling asleep, and after a few seconds, having taken his bearings, realized his wife wasn't at his side. It had been uncomfortable for the two of them lying squeezed together in the narrow bed, and he figured she had moved over to his. He turned his head left and saw that that's what it was. She lay curled up into a ball on her side, her back turned to him, a mirror image of what she had looked like when he saw her earlier from his bed. He turned his head back and, still feeling sweat ooze out of his body, after a while fell asleep, lulled by it as he'd been lulled by his wife's fingers earlier. For a long time he walked through a vast, black, empty space, until in the end he had the following dream. He's somewhere in the tropics, next to a wall that encloses a wide open area full of machinery designed for digging up ground and moving it around. Bulldozers, excavators, drilling machines, conveyors, heavy trucks, and so on. The site reminds him of the movie King Solomon's Mines he saw as a teenager, although physically there is no resemblance between the former and the latter. It must be the word mines that links the two together. He appears to be standing on a little hill, a mound of earth more properly, because the wall is tall, but he can see over it. He hasn't looked in the back, but feels that there is a jungle behind him, a dense forest of tall, thick tropical trees. He imagines the roots and creepers that grow on them to look like giant twisting snakes, pythons. This must be another element that links his dreams to the movie. In the middle of the open area there's a huge conical mound of crushed stone with a conveyor belt and on scaffolding leading to its top. This is where the excavated material is being piled up. The conveyor isn't running at the moment, and none of the other equipment is being operated, but there are tall, strange-looking figures moving about between the latter. They walk on their hind legs and have arms like people, but also something thick and long behind them that drags on the ground, supporting them, looking like big reptile tails. He is puzzled by this, looks closer, and decides that this is what those strange things are, reptile tails. The creatures aren't people but giant iguanas that walk on their hind legs. They are the ones who are operating our machinery and who are in charge of the site. Something about them scares him. They are creatures who are not well disposed toward humans. They make him think of the extraterrestrials described in H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, which he also read as a teenager. What are they doing, he thinks? What is going on? What is all the digging for? And then he realizes there's something round and dark on the ground visible behind the base of the conical mound, a hole. The iguanas are digging a hole in the ground, which is to be like the holes cenotes the Maya used to throw sacrificial victims in. They'll be throwing people into it once they are done. He feels in danger now and thinks of fleeing, but can't tear his eyes away from the sight. There's something fascinating about being in danger. It seemed to him at first the iguanas were moving about aimlessly, but realizes now that that's not true. They seem to be busy with equipment, inspecting and repairing it to make sure it works. This must be their lunchtime break. They have finished eating and are getting their equipment ready to use. Soon they'll start working. At first he was seeing everything from afar, but suddenly things are very close up. There's a big bulldozer right on the other side of the wall with an iguana moving around it, checking it here and there. It is no more than 5 feet away from him. He feels really scared now and wants to run away, but something seems to be pressing against his back like a wall. What he had thought to be trees growing behind him is apparently a solid wall. It is the wall of the edge of the jungle. The iguana has gotten ever closer, even closer now. He could touch it with his hand if he were to reach out. This is really scary. What will happen if it turns its head and sees him? Will it grab him and throw him into the hole? That is, take him over to the other iguanas to be thrown into the hole? The prospect is terrifying. At that moment, in fact, the iguana turns left and stops. A big, dark, flappy dewlap hangs down from its chin, and its small round eye stares intensely out of its head. It is looking straight at him. It is recognized he is a human being and will grab him next. Terrified to the extreme, he pushes against the wall at his back and is ready to scream. No, but at that instant woke up. He lay on his back, drenched with sweat, fully uncovered, the pillow wet under his head. It was dark in the room and the air conditioner wasn't running. The power was still off. Even though the phrase made no sense to him, he said to himself, "Those were the iguanas of heat." Thank you, and I'm sorry for my voice being so bad, and I thank Ole so much for having read so beautifully for you. I hope you enjoyed it.